Today's episode of the Fitness Business Podcast is perfect for anyone that's starting a fitness business, anyone that is intrigued about the franchise model, or if you just want to know about what options are available when it comes to owning and running a fitness business. Welcome along to this month's podcast partner update. My guest today is the CEO and founder of Discover Strength and Discover Strength Franchising, Luke Carlson. Luke, welcome along. Thank you for joining me today.
Chantal, as always, it's my pleasure.
Absolutely fantastic to have you back on the show. So as I mentioned up front, I mean, anyone that has owned a business, that maybe currently owns a business or a fitness business, I should say, they understand that they can come up with their fair share of challenges along the way. So I thought that today we could chat about a few of the most common problems that perhaps people come up against. And then once we've done that, let's then talk about how a franchise business model can actually solve those problems. So what are some of those common challenges that you hear about?
So Chantal, in 15 years of running my own locations and speaking at so many different events in our industry and in other industries around the world, what you find out is that you're struggling with this problem as a business owner and you're thinking, well, I'm the only one that has this problem. If I could just solve for this is the constraint. And if I could solve for the constraint, I'd be able to grow that much faster. The reality is we're all dealing with the same universal problems. And I think there's probably about 12 problems that plague so many of our fitness businesses. So I would love to chat through just a few of those, if that's okay.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear them.
So I think the first big problem that I see in most fitness businesses is a lack of what I would call a shared vision. The idea that everybody in the organization, whether it's a small studio and there's 3 employees, or a massive health club and there's literally 400 employees full-time and part-time, shared vision means we all know what the purpose of the organization is, we know what the values are, we know exactly what we're trying to achieve long-term. And the key to this is not that the owner or an executive team or the founder knows the answer to those questions. But if I'm working on the front line, do I know the answer to those fundamental questions? And do I know my role in moving us forward and how to show up and how to behave so that I'm aligned with those questions? So we call that shared vision. We all want to work someplace where we're aligned with the purpose, we're aligned with the values. It feels like our work becomes missional work. So many fitness businesses lack this, and they lack this throughout the entire organization.
Okay, so shared vision is that first one that you come up against. What are some of the others that you find?
This second one, and I think this is common in a lot of industries, but definitely fitness, is your concept subject to fad or fashion? Does the concept, your actual business, does it have staying power? We see this in a lot of food concepts, right? I live in the US and I think about there's 5-year periods or 7-year periods where there's a bagel shop everywhere. And then suddenly we can't eat carbs anymore and bagels are bad and we switch to something else. Right now, where I live, cookies are all the rage. I mean, you can't go to any retail strip center and not have a high-end cookie shop, right? We just got out of the 7-year period where cupcakes were all the rage. And so we see this in fitness also. It's popular and it has maybe a 7 to 8 year lifespan. And that's a problem. If you're investing a significant amount of money in this business concept, are people going to be still doing that modality of exercise 10 years from now or 15 years from now? So fad or fashion can plague so many of our fitness concepts.
Luke, that is such an important one to consider, isn't it? I mean, it's one of those things that you can get so caught up in the moment of what's hot right now and what people are loving right now. But what a great thing to consider is what's that going to be like in, 5 to 7 or 10 years time? Will people still love that? Great one. What else is there?
Yeah. I think the next big thing is we see so many fitness businesses that are new or mature, and they actually lack a business plan. And your listeners may think, no, I have a business plan. It shows me what my revenue is going to be like, what our customer growth is going to be like, month in and month out, quarter in and quarter out for a couple of years. That's the business plan. Well, that's not really a business plan. That's just projections. And that's just math on a spreadsheet. A business plan really articulates how you're going to succeed. And it can be done on just a couple of pages, but an executive team, a leadership team, an owner, a founder, frankly, at some point, a bank or a financial institution needs to be able to look at this plan and understand, okay, this is how you're differentiated. This is how you're going to go to market. It's more than just the projections. And I think we have so many fitness businesses that are founded by fitness practitioners who are brilliant, who are great at being a fitness practitioner, but they don't know how to actually develop the business plan. They have the fitness side down, but how do you actually develop a business plan is a totally different challenge, and one that I think we miss out on in our industry specific. We don't do it very well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one. And already the solutions are starting to pop into my head. I'm anticipating what we're going to talk about later on. So are there any others that you want to share with us?
So I'll go through a couple more, and I'm going to go through them a little bit more rapid fire, and then we'll get to, well, what's the remedy for all of this? So the next really big issue I see is a lack of differentiation and a lack of strategy. So the word strategy, so people use the word strategy all the time, but no one ever really defines what strategy means. Strategy is just how you're intentional about your differentiation. And so we look at so many fitness businesses, and I talk to so many fitness business owners, and I say, what makes you different? And their answer is always something that actually just makes them better. But the customer can't measure better because everybody's saying they're better. Every brand, every concept is saying we're better or we're the best. So how is your fitness business meaningfully, intentionally differentiated? That differentiation is the foundation of strategy. The next thing we see is a lack of systems, right? We walk into a business, and every time an employee does something, we are hoping that the person we hired can handle the situation right, rather than relying on the systems and processes that should guide that employee in that particular situation. So a lack of systematizing every element of the business. And I mean internally, our financial systems. I mean customer-facing systems. How specifically do we greet a customer? When a customer leaves, how do we give them a fond farewell? When we talk about exercise, what's every element of how we deliver the exercise session, whether it's group or small group or one-on-one, whatever that experience is, should be guided by our systems. And I think we lack those to a degree. I think most of our fitness businesses lack a process around customer experience. What's the appropriate level of customer experience for the price point that we're at and the brand that we're trying to create? I think that's one of them. I think maybe the biggest thing that fitness businesses really struggle with is retention of staff. And this is true right now of the last 12 months in every industry, but absolutely in the fitness industry. What is the plan? What is the process to increase staff retention? We have so much turnover in our industry, and I think we have to address that as a major constraint. But that applies to customers also, retention of customers. I mean, that is what our business is all about. It's one thing to drive new business or earn more revenue from existing customers or cut expenses, but if we don't have retention figured out, then we're always going to struggle. I think a couple of the other big problems we face is, how do I train and develop leaders and managers within the business? In order for the business to grow, it has to move beyond the founder as a leader and manager. We have to be able to develop other leaders that develop other leaders. I think we need great hiring systems. How do we understand that we grow great businesses with great people, but do we have a system and process around people and acquisition of our talents? Okay. So those are some of the things that I think we really struggle with. My last favorite one that I want to share is, I think in our industry, we spend a heck of a lot of money on marketing. And I think there's other ways that we could drive customer acquisition without spending money on marketing. And that plagues our industry. Is in order to grow a fitness business, you have to market. And I think there's another way. So when I look at the fitness businesses, and so many of these businesses I respect massively, when I have conversations with their owner and their key people, and I shouldn't say key people, I mean people, they have been in the job on the front line for 3 months, or they're the owner that's been operating the business for 25 years. These are the key themes that I see over and over and over again. And I think as the owner, as an operator, as someone who's interested in launching a fitness business, you better start wrestling with these key problems, because they are inevitable. They are going to emerge at some point as you start to launch the business and grow the business.
I couldn't agree more, Luke. And I have to say, of all the conversations that I've had over the last 12 months or so, one of the biggest reoccurring issues that I keep hearing from owners was that piece that you talked about on staff retention and the hiring process and policy. That's one of the things now in the last 12 months more than ever before that keeps coming back into conversation. So I think that is one of the key in all of that. And the other thing is that you are not leaving today until you tell me a little bit more is that last one, the marketing piece. I want to hear more about that. So now that we've got a bit of a snapshot on what those problems are, and I suspect that many of the FBP family are listening on thinking, yep, that sounds familiar, I recognize that. And if they didn't, hopefully it's making them think. Let's talk about some of those remedies, some of those solutions to actually solving those problems. Where do we get started?
Yeah, so we'll address a couple of them to illustrate examples, but I think big picture here, and Chantal, clearly I have a bias, but I've been on the other side as well. This is the value of moving forward with a franchise concept. Whatever industry you're in, whatever franchise concept you're looking at, the franchisor should be able to look at a potential franchisee and say, hey, these are the big problems in our industry, and here's how we've actually solved them. When you buy our franchise, you are buying a solution to all those problems. Now, what do most entrepreneurs in our space do, and in every industry? You start the company, and day in and day out, you have to solve these problems yourself. By moving forward with a franchise concept, of course, the idea is you are accelerating that learning curve by maybe 20 years in some cases, by 30 years. Someone else has already made these mistakes for you. They've learned, they've codified the systems and processes around each one of these problems, and they figured it out. So I would love to touch on just a couple of them so that I don't just say, buy a franchise, that's the solution. But that's the idea, that someone has been there before and there's the strength of the entire system and so much shared learning. So a couple that I think are worth talking about. When I talk about differentiation, I think the key here is you have to pick the three things that on paper make you different from the rest of your competition. And when I say different, they have to actually make you different. Your competition would have to agree with you. So sometimes I refer to these as your three uniques, but I also would call them your strategic anchors, your strategic differentiation, the three things that make you different. If we think about airlines, I love to think about Southwest Airlines in the US. They have three uniques. They have three strategic differentiators, and everybody in the company knows what they are. And they're not locked in a vault somewhere. Other competitors can see them and could attempt to emulate them. Going to be tough to emulate because Southwest tries to dig a moat around each one of them. So one of them is low fares. The second one is really quick turnaround times. And the third one is exceptional customer service for the people that appreciate those first two things. Now, if you're on a flight, if you're on a Southwest Airlines flight, and you try to order, for example, you stop the flight attendant and say, I would love a cold milk. The flight attendant will say, well, we don't have cold milk. And you say, well, why not? And the flight attendant, because he or she knows the strategy, says, well, one of the elements of our strategy, our strategic differentiation is quick turnaround times. And for me to give you cold milk, we would need a refrigerator. We don't have refrigerators in this plane because if we had a refrigerator, it would break down at some point. And then when this flight lands, we have to have a mechanic come out and fix that refrigerator, right? And that's going to slow down the turnaround time and it's going to cost money, which violates two of our uniques, two of those elements of our strategic differentiation. At that point, you say, okay, I get it. I don't need the cold milk. But what we just had there was we had a rare case of a frontline employee, because they know the strategy, they're empowered to actually interact with the customer. So the strategy can be simple and the frontline needs to understand the strategy. I like to say that empowerment is not about bringing your dog to work or having organic food in a break room. Empowerment is, I can make decisions. I can interact with customers. I can take action because I know what our strategy is. And I think that strategy should be as simple as three things. So that's one of the things that I think every fitness business has to figure out at some point. And I'll make mention of this because you said we have to cover. I think the other thing that I would love to address is the marketing piece. I haven't, so many fitness concepts, the plan is you have to market, and here's what you should be doing on social, and this is what the AdWords spend should be, and this is what we're doing still from a print standpoint. And I still think marketing is important, but Jay Baer, who is a former URSA presenter, and I've heard him speak at so many different events and read his books, he says marketing is the tax paid by those who have unremarkable products or services, right? And that's a paraphrase, but I probably have it almost word for word. I think we can spend more time making our service remarkable. And remarkable means worthy of someone remarking about. And so he has this concept of talk triggers. A talk trigger is what happens in your business that forces a customer to talk about your brand or talk about the experience after they visit you. So that talk trigger is operationalized. It occurs in your business in a repeatable way. It's not surprising and delighting a customer one time, but it's operationalized. But we actually look at it as marketing because we know consumers are going to talk about this. So we want to spend some time thinking in our business, what are customers going to leave and talk about? And we're going to hear it in our NPS feedback. We're going to see it on our Google reviews. When we get a referral and that referral comes to us, they're so easy to sell because that new prospect says, so-and-so sent me in and this is what they said. That is the talk trigger. So we can intentionally choose those talk triggers, build them into our business and grow that way. And to me, that's the best way to grow a business. I've never seen in our own businesses, when we spend more money on marketing, we grow faster. I think we focus more on the experience, and part of that experience is identifying what those talk triggers could be.
I love that term, talk triggers. And incidentally, Jay Baer was also a guest on the Fitness Business podcast a couple of years ago.
Absolutely.
I was lucky enough to interview him. So I know exactly who you're talking about. And I love that term of talk triggers and how important is that in our business. So thank you for explaining that. Are there any of the others that you want to touch on before we wrap up today?
I think that's a good overview, Chantal. I think, and this is probably what I should mention, every brand, every franchise company, but even if you're not a franchise, maybe you're a multi-unit brand, you're going to have your different approaches to overcoming these problems. The key is you're going to have a plan for how you're going to overcome them. So I'm about 10 minutes away from Lifetime Fitness's corporate headquarters in the US. They're aware of these problems. They may have a different approach than we have, but that's what you're looking for when you join a franchise organization or when you start growing your business. You have to be intentional about how you're going to combat and overcome these key reoccurring problems or themes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I have to say, for everyone that's watching today, and as I said up front, this really was an episode for those of you that perhaps have owned a fitness business before, you're considering owning a business, you're just intrigued to know more. In addition to having joined us for today's interview, I also want to encourage you to go back and take a watch of the interview that Luke and I did earlier this year. Luke, I think it was back in February, and we talked about why buy a strength training franchise, and there was some really good information in that one as well. So I want to encourage everyone to go back and check that out. So Luke, for people that want to get in touch with you, that want to talk to the team, that want to know more about a Discover Strength training franchise, how do they best get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best place to start is discoverstrengthfranchise.com. Everything they would want to know, they can find out there, and they can submit something to have one of our team reach out to them and start the conversation.
Fantastic. So discoverstrengthfranchise.com. We'll pop it down below in the comments so you guys can check that out. We'll also pop it in the show notes. So Luke, it's always a pleasure catching up. Thank you for being a podcast partner for the Fitness Business Podcast. We love having you on board. You've been a longtime friend and guest of the show. Still up there in one of our highest downloaded shows of all time. I want to say it was episode 91. It was back a very, very long time ago, but one of my favorites from over the years. So Luke, it's such a pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
It's my pleasure completely. Thank you, Chantal.